Hello everyone, how's it going? And welcome to my champion tier list for patch 5.2. A bunch of new items have come into the game. We've got rid of the rune items, there's no more rune items, and there's no more light items. There's kind of a new meta coming around as well for the Rift. You know, you're going to be seeing a lot of changes in this tier list. It is still very early on in the season, so some things will change, and if they do change, I'll make sure to keep them updated on my website. But this is an early look at what the tier list is going to look like and what champions are going to look like. I'm going to go through every single champion, talk about the new items, whether they use the items well or whether they just don't use any of the items at all, which is sometimes going to be the reasoning whether the champion moves up or down in the tier list. And obviously, we still had a bunch of buffs and nerfs this patch as well. A lot to get through in this tier list. I got a big list of all the changes that have been made, and probably the biggest changes have happened in the Baron lane. There are a few champions that are still staying in the S+ tier, but there are quite a lot of new champions that have moved back up into the S+ tier and kind of new to the S+ tier in a way. Renekton is still up there. I still think Renekton is incredibly powerful. Whether you want to go for Sundered Sky or Eclipse, I think they're both kind of situational items depending on who you're up against. Still a very, very strong champion to play. Still one of the best early game champions to play as well. Still very, very strong and also really, really good during team fights. Again, the new items are kind of situational. Darius, I think the buff was incredible for him. I think Darius is one of the strongest Baron lane champions at the moment with the changes and the buffs that happened to him. Riven with Eclipse and Sundered Sky, two incredibly core items for her. And not only that, she also got a buff in the most recent patch. No idea why they buffed Riven and also gave her probably two of the best items for her in the game. But hey ho. Gwen is a little bit popular as well. I think Gwen does really well against these bruisers that are going to start to become really, really strong in the meta, you know, especially these bruisers that come through with like Sundered Sky, and they build all this HP and they build all of this damage because you're going to build the likes of Riftmaker. You're still going to be building Nash's Tooth. Gwen's kit in general does very, very well against these champions that build a lot of HP. So Gwen going to be sitting in the S+ tier for this patch so far. Really, really strong champion. Has been strong for honestly forever, but I definitely feel like she gets that extra edge this patch because of the way the meta is looking with all of these bruisers and all of these champions building all of this HP. Jace with the new Eclipse, very, very strong. It gives him a lot better trading potential in the Baron lane. He's still going to struggle against the tanks and against the champions that might build Divine Sundra, but still very, very strong champion if you are against, like, say, like a squishy champion, for example, in the Baron lane. Say, for example, someone like Yone, still going to be really, really good. And like I said, Eclipse gives him a lot better trading potential and also gives him a bit of shielding as well when he's looking to try and jump into melee range. Jax, again, a new item. Sundered Sky works very well with Jax. He also still has Riftmaker. His rework has also been very, very strong as well. So that's why he's sitting in the S+ tier. And I've finally added Maokai into the Baron lane as well. A lot of you have been asking me to add Maokai into the Baron lane into the tier list, so I've done that. Still stays in the S+ tier. Yes, he lost a bit of maximum health. Yes, he lost a bit of damage on his first ability. Again, in my opinion, I don't think these nerfs were enough. The champion is still very, very viable, still very strong, especially if you're building items like Heartsteel in the Baron lane. You can trade super easily. You have your passive, which allows you to keep on healing every single time that you auto attack after a few seconds. So it has a lot of sustain, a lot of crowd control, and it's just pretty much unkillable in the Baron lane, which is going to be very, very nice. Garen, even though he received a nerf, is still sitting in the S tier. I still think this champion is super easy to play, still really, really strong. Dr. Mundo, again, a champion that's very, very strong against a lot of magic damage. If you're against a lot of magic damage, probably one of the strongest tanks to play in the Baron lane. Still does quite a lot of damage with the Heartsteel plus Titanic Hydra build. Same with Set as well. Again, another champion that goes for this Heartsteel Titanic Hydra build because of the way that it works and still how strong it is. Urgot as well with Black Cleaver plus Titanic Hydra. Again, another champion that can perform pretty well with this item combo. These three champions are still sitting in here because this item combo is still going to be very, very strong. Shen is a bit of an interesting one. You still have the split pushing potential of Shen. Obviously, the big thing now with Shen, a change that happened quite a while ago with his first ability now having an auto attack spread. You also have Sunfire Aegis that got buffed as well. Again, a champion that has quite a lot of traded potential with the likes of Divine Sunderer in the lane. And it just allows you to split push as well. You know, you can split push, you can create pressure in the lane. And if you ever need to join a team fight, you can just use your ultimate, which I think is such a really huge, impactful tool in Wild Rift. Tank Yasuo, still pretty strong. I would say he's pretty okay in the Baron lane. You know, he does pretty well against most of the bruisers and the tanks as well. Just a really annoying champion to play against, especially the tank version. Volibear, we've been seeing quite a lot with the likes of Heartsteel, playing this more of like a tank Volibear build, where he's just become more of a nuisance rather than damage. Again, a champion that likes to go for things like Divine Sunder as well, Riftmaker to get him that extra bit of healing, and also the extra bit of true damage as well, which is also pretty good. I moved Ornn down into the S tier. In my opinion, Maokai is the best tank, so Ornn has moved down into S tier. Still really good champion to play, you know, even though I've moved him down from S+ tier down to S tier. Doesn't mean that the champion is not strong at all. The same with the likes of Akali and Aatrox. I've also moved these two down into the S tier. Again, it doesn't mean that they're not strong. It just, in my opinion, you know, champions like Gwen, Riven, Darius, and Jace, and even Jax just overcome them just slightly this patch. I mean, Aatrox still could do pretty well with the likes of Eclipse. If you're against tanks, there's a pretty situational item. Sundered Sky, also pretty decent for Aatrox. And Akali's still good with the item set that she still goes for, even with the changes to the likes of, you know, Infinity Orb and Riftmaker going back to its normal items. It means that Akali is still going to be a very, very strong champion. Into the S tier, again, I moved a few champions down. I think the big thing that I kind of want to do now with this tier list is kind of make sure that I separate the S tier and the A tier more, especially put more I would rather my tier list be more stacked full of A tier champions rather than S tier, because what's the point of putting 20-30 champions in S tier? Like, that doesn't really accomplish anything at all. So it's about really trying to differentiate the S tier champions, the A tier champions, and even the B tier champions as well. And, you know, the big thing being the S tier champions being the champions that are still going to be very strong, and the A tier champions still going to be good champions. Like, they're still strong champions, but they're more situational compared to like the S tier champions. So I moved some of them down. Sion, I honestly don't think Sion is that good. I mean, I still see people playing inting Sion, and honestly, sometimes it still works just because players don't understand how to play against it, and players don't understand the, hey, you just need to play 4 versus 4 and you just need to defend against the Sion, and he just becomes completely useless, basically. But he is still pretty annoying. That's why he's still sitting in the A tier. I don't think he's S tier worthy just because he's not really that strong in general as a champion, but just annoying more than anything else. Yone, I also moved down as well. I still think Yone can perform pretty well in the Baron lane. The problem is that the nerfs that happened a few patches ago now to the likes of his second ability, his shielding not being that great, and also his base health also went down, I believe, a few patches ago. Also, Blade of Rune King not being a thing anymore, going back to normal Blade of Rune King, so that item is not as powerful, which gave Yone a lot more power in the Baron lane. So again, he's still a strong champion to play, but again, moved it down into A tier. Other champions in A tier, Kens can still work pretty well, especially with the ultimates, the huge massive AoE damage in team fights, also a lot of poking damage during the laning phase. Same with Teemo as well. I think this champion is more annoying than anything else. Poke damage that he can deal in the laning phase. He's a range champion as well, which is also why Jace is pretty good, by the way. You know, the range advantage that you get versus melee champions can definitely help you in the early stages of the game, which is why Teemo is up here. Vladimir, decent in the Baron lane. I think, in my opinion, a lot better in the mid lane. Struggles a little bit in the Baron lane against these bruisers. Can't really trade as much. And obviously, Vladimir's weakest point during the game is the early game, which is where these bruisers can, you know, take advantage of Vladimir and be really, really strong. Irelia more difficult than anything else. I think the champion is still pretty decent. I think she's kind of fallen off a little bit, especially with things like Sundered Sky and Eclipse coming in, which she doesn't really build, to be fair. She wants to just build a lot of attack speed, so she's not really benefiting from the new items. Malphite, a decent tank, but again, there's better tanks out there. You know, all the tanks above in S tier are a lot better. Gragas, I still want to try the Rod of Ages plus the new AP item. Let me know if you tried it down in the comments. I'm still curious to see how he's going to perform in the new meta. I've kept him in A tier for now because I feel like you can still play a more tanky version of Gragas in the top lane. It can still perform pretty decently. Camille's okay. I don't think Camille just has the same power as other bruisers. Again, the problem is that the likes of Camille and also Fiora as well, which is also moving down into A tier, These two champions just don't have that much benefit with the new items, and the new items are pretty decent. They're pretty strong. But Camille can still join team fights, still be pretty strong. Again, Fiora mainly going to be really, really strong in duels, in 1v1 duels and split pushing. But kind of what I predicted with the new meta, with the new T-Hex, and basically everyone going ARAM when the T-Hex happens, yeah, Fiora becomes pretty useless. She's not the best during team fights. She's decent, but she's not the best. Camille, a lot more better during team fights, but again, just not as powerful. B tier champions like Tryndamere is still down here. He's okay, not too bad, you know, doesn't really do too much. Olaf, I've been seeing some people try out Eclipse and Sundered Sky. I still need to give Olaf a try. Again, in the Baron lane, I don't think he's, you know, very strong. I think he's a lot better in the jungle. Same with Pantheon as well. I think the new items Sundered Sky and Eclipse definitely work very well, with Pantheon, but I think he's a lot better in the jungle, especially because he can use his ultimate and he can use his second ability a lot more efficiently in terms of the jungle. Wukong top lane is just no longer a thing. Honestly, they've just completely killed Wukong top lane because of the healing that they removed on Wukong's first ability. And you can't really build the new items. Nasus with Sundered Sky can be really good, especially with the stacking of his first ability. I moved him up from C to B tier. Also, he's got a pretty nice buff as well, so I'll definitely have to give him a try. And Kayle still down in C tier, and also Singed down in C tier. Honestly, the new AP item didn't do anything at all for Singed. And I think in general, the new AP item doesn't really do anything at all for most champions. I think the only way that you can build this new AP item is with items like Rod of Ages or maybe Liandry's as well, which I'll talk about a little bit later on with some other champions. Moving into the jungle, again, another tier list that has kind of completely changed. There's a lot of movement around in the jungle. There's a lot of champions moving up. There's a lot of champions moving down. Again, the big meta shifts were with the Baron lane and the jungle with all of these new items. Maokai still stays in the S+ tier, in my opinion, in the jungle. His jungle clear did get a little bit nerfed with the first ability damage going down, but I think the champion is just super easy to play, super fun to play as well, and also he's just a tank that you might need for your team. If you don't have a tank, then you can go someone like Maokai and just be a very strong tank in general. Lee Sin still really good. You know, you can go for items like Eclipse and Sundered Sky, a champion that is still very strong, has really good carry potential. The only real downside of Lee Sin is that he's a little bit difficult to play. You know, he's a little bit difficult to master, but if you can get that going, then you're going to be pretty much Gucci. Hecarim, I don't think actually builds any of the new items, in my opinion. I don't think he's very good with Eclipse or Sundered Sky. I think you just stick with the Trinity Force build. I mean, you could try like Trinity Force into Sundered Sky, but the thing with Hecarim is that he doesn't really auto-attack that much. I mean, he auto-attacks sometimes like in between using his abilities, but he doesn't really work very well with any of the new items. Same with items like Eclipse as well. It's like you want more beefiness and you want more tankiness with Hecarim to be more of a tank rather than a carry, if that makes sense. That's why, in my opinion, he doesn't really use the new items. Xin Zhao, pretty good. You know, you can go for the likes of Trinity Force plus Sundered Skies, two really, really strong items. Again, a champion that's still very powerful. Evelynn, just one of the best low elo champions to play, one of the best carry junglers to play as well. A lot of players don't understand how to play around the invisibility of her and how she can play. And then we have champions moving back up or up into the S tier, S+ tier, I should say. Talon back up into the S+ tier. I think with Eclipse added into the game gives Talon a little bit more scaling. Yes, you can go for the armor penetration during the early game, which gives him a lot more early game power, which I still think is going to be very, very strong. Again, a few patches ago, they did nerf his jungle clear, which means that his jungle clear is not as strong as what it once was before. But with the likes of Eclipse coming into the game, it gives him that shielding when he jumps in, so it gives him more survivability, and also it gives him that % health damage as well, so it gives him a lot more scaling damage. Whereas the likes of, you know, items like Ghostblade, which you still build, by the way, is like a first item, you can still go for the likes of Ghostblade, but the problem is that your damage kind of falls off a little bit in the later stages of the game because you're only getting that plus armor penetration instead of the percentage per armor penetration for items like Serratus Grudge and Mortal Reminder. Lilia, this has been a long time coming. I should have moved Lilia into S+ tier probably a while ago, to be fair. Lilia, very, very strong champion. Super annoying to deal with. Really, really strong when it comes to moving around, the mobility that she has, the burst damage that she has as well with Electrocute. You've got items like Liandry's, Riftmaker coming in. You can even go for even more damage, things like Death Cap and Infinity Orb. Just a very strong champion. Again, very strong to deal with. Also clears the jungle more efficiently than I think any other jungler in the game right now. Her jungle clear speed is crazy strong. And Viego probably added one of the best items in the game for Viego, Sundered Sky. The champion is completely busted right now. I mean, honestly, you can go for Blade Ruin King, Trinity Force, Sundered Sky. These three items are so damn good with Viego and make him into such a huge carry. You know, I mean, what more do I need to say about Viego? You have his ultimate, you can take over players' souls, you can go invisible, you can gank very well. Viego is just a complete champion that is just incredibly powerful overall. Vi's pretty decent with Sundered Sky. Again, a champion that has lockdown and is pretty decent when it comes to jungling. Gragas, you can still go for the full AP Gragas build, the full AP one-shot Gragas build. It's pretty good, especially because Gragas has been buffed the last few patches, so I think it's pretty decent. If I'm not mistaken, I did. Oh no, Aatrox has stayed the same. I thought I moved Aatrox down. I couldn't remember if Aatrox was S+ tier or not. That's why I have to make notes on these things. But Aatrox stays the same. Again, a champion that you can go for Eclipse and Sundered Sky in the jungle. I think he's a decent jungler. He's not like a really broken jungler, but I think he's pretty decent. Both Kanes still work pretty well. They both feel kind of weak at the moment. I think Kayn in general feels weaker than what he was before, but again, items like Eclipse coming in for Shadow Assassin, and also Rascane, by the way. Rascane also works really well with Eclipse. Coming into it means that Kayn is going to be pretty nice. Volibear as a jungler is also still pretty decent. You clear through the jungle pretty quickly. You're pretty decent at ganking, especially tower dives as well with his ultimate. Yone jungle, again, a pretty good carry, really nice champion to play. Again, his build hasn't really changed. Kha'Zix with Eclipse is pretty decent. I just don't feel the same damage as what I did before with Kha'Zix. Kind of same as what like Kayn feels, for example. I feel like in terms of more of a carry, you can go for someone like Evelynn or Talon or even Lilia, which is just going to do more damage overall than Kha'Zix. That's why Kha'Zix is sitting down there. Amumu I've moved up, and also Rammus as well. Actually, Amumu might have already been in S tier, but Rammus and Amumu, two of the second best junglers, just behind Maokai. Amumu, pretty annoying to deal with, especially with items like Sunfire being a lot more stronger now, especially with the buff that happened a few patches ago. If you build tank Amumu, just super annoying to deal with. His ultimate, his crowd control, it's very difficult to try and escape him, and also it's very difficult to kill him at the same time. And again, kind of easy to play champion, kind of similar to Rammus as well. Again, with this bruiser meta coming in, with so many new AD items coming into the meta, a lot of champions are going to go for, or a lot of players, sorry, are going to go for AD champions. And if you're against a lot of AD champions, who's the best champion to play? Of course, it's Rammus. The more armor you have, the more damage you're going to be dealing with Rammus, and that's why he's moved up into the S tier. Fiddlestick, still one of the best surprise party junglers to play. You know, you coming out of a bush, you doing a lot of damage, still going to be very strong. And of course, Riven moving up as well. Kind of same as what I said in the Baron lane. Riven with Eclipse, with Sundered Sky, still clears the jungle pretty decently, and is still a very strong jungler to play, and has also moved up into S tier. Again, as I mentioned, you know, these S tier champions are going to be the strong, like really strong champions, like they're really good. And then the A tier is going to be more packed in these tier lists, and also the B tier as well. Whereas like the A tier champions are okay, but I feel like they're not as strong as the S tier champions. You can still play the A tier champions. It just, when you go down to B tier, this is champions where you feel like they might be a little bit weaker. In terms of tier list, you know, any champions from A and above is really strong, but the A tiers are going to be a lot more packed out than the S tier. Because like I said, in my opinion, what's the point of packing out the S tier with 20-30 champions when the S tier is supposed to be one of the biggest and best tiers in a tier list, for example. Anyway, moving to the A tier, I need to try and check my notes to make sure that I have got things going well. Cool, I know what I'm doing with the A tier. I mean, most of these champions have stayed the same, to be fair. You know, Gwen jungle, your jungle clear speed is pretty low, but your scaling with Gwen jungle is pretty decent. As I mentioned with Pantheon jungle, a lot better than, Pantheon top lane. Pantheon jungle is a lot better. I don't think he's a OP champion with the new items, but I think it definitely does make him stronger. Nautilus, AP Nautilus jungle, really, really annoying to deal with and very, very powerful. Morgana can also still be pretty good in the jungle, still has really good jungle clear speed, and can still be really good when it comes to using the ultimate during team fights. Nunu, I kind of want to try with the Rod of Ages plus the new AP item. Haven't tried it just yet. I still think the champion's pretty decent. I think he's okay, just not really strong. Olaf, as I mentioned, with the new items coming in, especially Sundered Sky as well, giving you just so much more damage. Eclipse, not really too much, but Sundered Sky can be a really, really strong item for Olaf. Wukong, a lot better jungler than what he is in the Baron lane, as I mentioned before. Just a lot stronger now during team fights and is not really that stronger trading during the laning phase. Fizz as an AP jungler as a carry, still really good. Same with Echo as well. Both of these as an AP jungler, still pretty decent. Kindred's okay, you know, pretty decent. Doesn't do any well with any of the new items. You still want to go for the crit build. Jarvan with Sundered Sky, definitely going for a more bruiser build now with Jarvan. This one-shot Jarvan build is still probably going to be a thing. You know, you can go for first strike. You can try and go for the one-shot Jarvan, but I feel like with the likes of Eclipse and Sundered Sky coming in, he's going to be building a lot more of a bruiser build. Master Yi, I have moved down from S tier down to A tier. I just don't think the champion does well at the moment in the current meta, especially with all of these bruisers coming in that are just going to be so annoying, have so much crowd control as well. One big counter to Master Yi is going to be crowd control, which a lot of these champions in the above tiers have. Diana jungle still pretty good as a burst mage in the jungle. Graves kind of got a little bit nerfed because Ruin Infinity Edge is no longer a thing, which I'll talk about a little bit in the ADC tier list, but still can perform pretty well. And Darius moving up from the B tier to the A tier. I don't think he's an S tier jungler. The problem with Darius in the jungle is that he just can't gank as well. Like, he's not that impactful in the jungle, whereas in the Baron lane he could really take advantage of the buffs that he got in the early game with his first ability, and he can trade a lot more efficiently, whereas in the jungle he can't really do too much. You're just kind of farming the jungle, and his gank potential is not really too great. Then you have B tier champions. I don't have any champions in the C tier in the jungle because I feel like they're just isn't really a C tier champion worthy. You know, even champions like Warwick and Rengar that I had in C tier before can still perform pretty decently. I've seen Warwick's do well. I haven't seen a lot of Rengar, to be fair, but I think that Rengar can still do pretty decently. It might be a little bit difficult in this kind of meta, especially because of the way it is with so many bruisers and so many tanks with these new items, so it can be a little bit difficult. I'm kind of waiting for the Rengar rework at this point, to be fair. Shengu, I mean, also in this B tier is kind of more unique jungles. You know, think of like Fiora, Camille, Jace jungle. These are mainly Baron laners that can be played in the jungle, but they're more unique than anything else and not really strong. Same with Irelia as well. Zed with Eclipse is okay, but again, can just easily be countered by Stasis, and there's not really a lot of targets that you can focus at the moment with Zed in the jungle. Shyvana, if you clear through the jungle, if you get some stacks, then Shyvana jungle can be pretty good. But again, it's just that kind of AFK moment during the early game where you sometimes want a jungler that wants more impact during the early game, and it can be very, very strong. Dr. Mundo, decent in jungle, decent tank, pretty decent. Neela's okay as well. A little bit difficult to play, can sometimes be difficult to carry as well at the same time. Tryndamere, all right in the jungle, doesn't really clear through jungle pretty well. So yeah, B tier, as I mentioned, these are still junglers that can still play, you know, they're still viable champions. And then the A tier, you get stronger, then the S and the S plus tier get basically even stronger. Moving into the mid lane now. Again, some shift and some movement in the mid lane, maybe not as much as the Baron lane and the jungle. Like I said, the big changes in this patch were the Baron lane and the jungle. S plus tier, a few movements around. Zoe moving back up into the S plus tier. I need to get rid of First Strike. This should be Electrocute. Electrocute now with Zoe is very, very powerful. There's also some builds in China that are going Lichbane Zoe, so that might be something that I might have to test and give a try. Because the way that Zoe works is after she uses the ability, she gets an empowered auto attack anyway. And then with this on top of Lichbane, again, going to be very, very powerful. So I have to give that a try. Jace, as I mentioned, in the top lane, very, very strong. Also in the mid lane as well with items like Eclipse, going to be really, really powerful. Kassadin moving back up into the S plus tier just because of the scaling that Kassadin has at the moment in this game is just absolutely disgusting. I feel like in general, the game is getting a lot slower, and it's getting to a point now where, you know, Rift Herald, for example, are not as strong. Rift Herald is not as strong as what it was before. There's not a lot of towers being taken very quickly in the early game, and that benefits Kassadin a lot with his scaling and just playing underneath the tower and waiting to get to his item point. Akali's still pretty strong as well, as I mentioned, the Baron lane, and Vladimir in the mid lane. Again, he has a lot better time against these mid lane mages compared to the Baron lane bruisers, which is why he's an S+ tier. And again, as I mentioned, with scaling, or with how the game rhythm is working at the moment in terms of the pace of the game, it's definitely becoming a lot slower. So that's going to benefit Vladimir quite a bit. Into the S tier, new champion Lissandra. I know people are probably going to put Lissandra in the S+ tier. I mean, I'm kind of scared to look at other tier lists and say like, oh, Lissandra's completely broken. This champion is not broken at all. Honestly, I would say probably one of the best balanced release champions, I would say, in the game. I do not think Lissandra is broken at all. I think she's good. I don't think she's like A tier, for example. I think she's pretty decent. She's just not completely broken tier. She's just not she's not broken. There are parts of her game which are weak, especially during the early game. Her early game, she can poke a little bit with her first ability. I feel like her first ability poke is not as powerful as what it is on PC League. You know, you don't really trade that often during the early game. I think she is also really, really squishy. So if you use your ultimate on the wrong target, or if you don't use your ultimate on yourself, then you can get one shot very, very easily. But also she's just very, very strong. You know, her lockdown potential is really, really good. She's also really annoying to play against. She has a lot of mobility and a lot of safetiness with her third ability. So again, a champion that can perform pretty well, but she's not like completely broken where if you pick her, you're going to win every single game, which is something like Maokai released, for example. You know, when Maokai released, completely broken, and also champion is still broken, for example, whereas Lissandra, definitely not as much. Orianna still staying the S tier, still really good mage to play in the mid lane, a lot of sustained damage, a lot of mana, making it really annoying. Yone and Yasuo still sitting in the mid lane as well. Both these champions and both the brothers still do pretty decent in the mid lane, especially against these mages, these weak early game mages, which is really where Yasuo and Yone can become very powerful. Vex in the mid lane as a burst mage, still really, really good. Ziggs as well with his poke damage, incredible. Syndra with, again, catch potential, really, really good. I moved Annie up to S tier as well. I feel like Annie in general is pretty underrated. I think she's probably one of the easiest mid lane champions to play. And also her catch potential is just absolutely crazy. You know, you use your ultimate on top of all your other burst damage with Annie, and she becomes really, really powerful. So I think Annie actually deserves to move into the S tier. Again, in my opinion, a pretty underrated pick. Aurelion Sol moving down into the S+ tier. I just don't think Aurelion Sol has the same scaling as the other champions in the S+ tier. You know, you think of all these S+ tier champions and you kind of see the meta in the mid lane at the moment is all about these scaling mid lane champions. Vladimir, Kassadin, Zoe, Akali, Zedge, and all of them have incredible scaling. Aurelion Sol also has the same scaling, but it's just not as powerful as what he once was. You know, his scaling was really coming in when he was first reworked, and now they've nerfed him a few times. He's just not as strong as what he once was. Still a good mid lane to play, don't get me wrong. Can still be a very good mid lane to play, but just not as strong, unfortunately. Again, as you can see, not a lot of champions in S+ and S tier, more champions in A and B tier. Again, kind of making sure that I don't put too many champions in S tier. Moving down into the A tier, seeing if I've done anything at all with the A tier. Yeah, so the big thing with the A tier is Lucian moving down from S tier to A tier. I'll talk about it a little bit more in the ADC tier list, but Lucian now with Rune Infinity Edge not being a thing, the item is a lot weaker than what it was before and it's just not really built. You can still go for Duskbladed mids and give that a try. But again, Lucian just not as powerful in the mid lane anymore. Pyke I've moved up from B tier to A tier. I feel like Pyke in general still has pretty good mid lane wave clear and can actually do really well in terms of roaming. If you like roaming, if you like going around trying to make an advantage for the rest of your team, then Pyke is a great champion for that. Other than that, everything else in the A tier still stays the same. Swain, you can go for the new build with the Rod of Ages plus the new AP item. Is pretty decent. You can become a pretty good tank. You can also build Twin Guard on top of this as well, making it really, really strong. Echo's still pretty decent in the mid lane. He's okay. He's not the best, but he still has pretty good catch potential. Twisted Fate with the roaming, with the extra damage that you can do, the lockdown that he has as well also makes him pretty good. Zyra is just more annoying than anything else. Still a really good champion to play nonetheless. Veigar, again, with his pick potential, becomes really, really strong. He also has a lot of one-shot potential as well with his ultimate. Fizz as an assassin becomes really, really good in the mid lane once he gets a few items. Again, you're pretty weak during the early game, but still pretty decent decent later on. Lux, really, really good in the mid lane as well. Really easy, super safe champion to play in the mid lane. Again, you have the catch potential. You have the wave clear. Yes, the wave clear might not be as strong as what it was before, but it's still really good. Gragas mid, not as strong as in the jungle, but still pretty good in the mid lane if you can try and get catches. Kennen pretty good in the mid lane. Ahri's in a bit of a weird spot where I feel like she just doesn't do as much damage, which is why she's not in S tier. She's in A tier. Corki mid can also still work pretty well if you have the right build available. Moving down into the B tier, again, B tier is more of like unique champions or champions that are just not that strong. Kai'Sa mid lane isn't really a thing anymore. I was thinking of removing it, but I kind of want to keep Kai'Sa mid because there's so many different variants of builds for Kai'Sa mid that I kind of want to showcase. But Kai'Sa in general, just not that good in the mid lane. Seraphine mid lane's okay, easy champion to play, pretty decent, but just kind of annoying to deal with more than anything else. Doesn't really do that much damage, isn't a carry compared to other mages in my opinion. Same with Karma as well, not really a carry, more of an annoyance than anything else. Katarina mid lane just struggles completely at the moment. I think the same with Diana. You know, some of these melee champions do struggle. Katarina, obviously, against a lot of crowd control, suffers a lot and is just really, really difficult to kind of get going. If you get an early game lead, to be honest, with any champion, if you get an early game lead, you can perform pretty well. But Katarina, if you stay even with the enemy mid laner, most of the time the enemy mid lane is going to perform better than you. So that's why, in my opinion, Katarina's not really too great. Again, she can just get cancelled with her ultimate. Same with Diana as well. I think she's decent in the mid lane. She's a lot better in the jungle because you have that way of just getting to level 5 a lot quicker in the jungle and also a lot more safely. Brand I'm maybe underrating. I mean, I've seen a lot of people say that Brand is actually pretty good at the moment, especially with all of his burst damage, but I put him in B tier. Maybe I should move him up into A tier. I'm not too sure. Malphite mid. I mean, people wanted to see my Malphite mid lane build. I mean, it's not good in the mid lane anyway. Akshan I've moved down into from A to B tier. Again, Akshan with no more Rune Infinity Edge. ADCs in general in the mid lane are not as strong as what they were before. Talon mid, not as strong as in Talon jungle. Problem is that you can't really get to level 5 as safely. Again, a melee champion that might struggle. Has some pretty decent matchups, but most of the time struggles in the mid lane. Morgana, I think, is just annoying again more than anything else. Again, Morgana's maybe a champion that I should move up. The same with Brand as well. I think I should maybe move up Morgana and Brand. Brand because of the burst damage, and Morgana just because she has like the easiest wave clear in the entire game in mid lane. So you can just keep clearing the wave and just playing super safe. And she's pretty decent during team fights as well. Zed's still not good, even with Eclipse being added into the game. As I mentioned, Stasis being just a one huge counter, which is pretty annoying for Zed. Irelia, pretty decent in the mid lane. I think that you can get a lot of carry potential, but she's pretty difficult to play. And Galio also down in B tier as well. Can be decent, but not too bad. And then Kayle down in C tier. Now onto the duo lane. Duo lane and supports in general have not changed too much. There are a few big changes with duo lane and supports, which is what I'm going to talk about now. In terms of the S plus tier, Caitlyn probably the biggest beneficial in this new patch. The big thing with ADCs now is that Infinity Edge is no longer an item that you want to build. It's only really built on some champions. I would say champions like Samira, Draven, potentially even Neela if you really want to as well. Other than that, no one else really builds Infinity Edge. I mean, you can build it on Zeri as well, but other than that, a lot of the item builds are going for more of these utility items, kind of the same as what the patch was like before the Rune and Light items were even in the game. So Caitlyn, biggest beneficial because you can now go back to the Stormrazor Magnetic Blaster build, which is really powerful before the Infinity Edge patch. Ezreal's still really good in mid lane as well. You can either go for Conqueror or Empowerment. Empowerment gives you a lot more early game damage. In general, Ezreal's pretty good as well. The buffs that he got were pretty good. Man immune buffs also pretty good. Same with Varus. There are many different builds that you can go with Varus, and again, being his biggest beneficial this patch as well because none of his items got changed. You think of all these three ADCs, none of the items that they can build really got changed. You know, Varus's AP build didn't get changed, Ezreal's build didn't get changed. So these three champions are definitely, in my opinion, the best out there at the moment. In my opinion, slowly close by. You can see Tristana being up there as well. Tristana can easily go into the S+ tier just because of her range, her carry potential. Again, she more benefits from the utility build, going for items like Magnetic Blaster and Navori Quick Blades. Lucian, you don't want to build Infinity Edge on anymore. You want to go back to the Duskblade build that was a thing before Rune Infinity Edge. Again, Infinity Edge doesn't have 225% crit anymore, only has 205% crit. That's why you're probably feeding the nerf that's coming into the game with Infinity Edge. So in general, not a very good item build, and in my opinion is why Lucian's moved from S+ tier down to S tier, because that Infinity Edge build is no longer a thing. Zeri, pretty decent, pretty difficult champion to play, but is also pretty decent. You can just keep spamming the auto tap button over and over again with Zeri and just perform pretty well. Severe, again, another champion that has a lot of great team fight potential, super safe, super easy to play during the laning phase. You can just keep clearing waves. You don't have the same power as what you do in the laning phase, but still is pretty decent. Kai'Sa in the mid lane, also pretty decent. In the mid lane, sorry, Kai'Sa ADC is still pretty decent, where you can build many different builds with Kai'Sa. On hit build, AP build, crit build has been a thing that has been popping up quite recently, which can also be pretty decent. So yeah, there's that. I mean, in my opinion, not an S+ tier champion at the moment, only sitting in S tier, again, because of some of the item builds. You know, Blade de Rune King got increased in price, so not really a first item worthy. Terminus is now 3,400 gold. Kai'Sa's in a weird spot where there's not really a good first item for her. It's only really Duskblade and that's it, really. Xayah's still pretty good. You know, you can use her feathers. She can still do a lot of damage. Again, she benefits quite a lot from this utility build. And then Kalista in the S tier. I think that the change and the optimization that happened to Kalista is probably one of the biggest changes I think I've seen in an ADC for a long time. If you don't know now, the third ability, the Rend, basically when you use the ability, you can take the spears out of an enemy champion. Before, it was pretty difficult to know when to actually take spears out of an enemy champion to kill them. There was a threshold before, but it wasn't really displayed. And if you don't know, when you take out spears out of an enemy champion or a minion, if it kills that minion, if it kills that enemy champion, then you get a reset on your third ability. So you can use your spears and you can rend them out over and over again. Now, the big thing with Kalista is she got an optimization where she can now take the spears out, and she actually has a health threshold now. So now you get to know when you can actually kill an enemy champion with her third ability. So a really big buff for Kalista. You can now just keep auto attacking until you see that threshold, kind of like Pyke Ultimate, for example. You know when you take out the Rend, you know when to get the reset of your third ability, which in my opinion is a huge buff. Jinx, pretty decent, works pretty well. Again, another champion that probably builds Infinity Edge, but again, doesn't really benefit a lot from Infinity Edge, but it's probably going to go for a more on-hit build with Runa's Hurricane and Magnetic Blaster. Vayne's okay as a late game carry. I think that if you're against a lot of tanks, Vayne could be very strong, but the problem is her early game is pretty weak. Draven's a pretty decent champion. Early game, very strong, just struggles in terms of scaling. Ashe, more of a utility AD carry, not really a carry, but more to do with her slows and her crowd control being very powerful. Samira, not really great at the moment. Same with Jhin. Both these champions I want to be good, but they're just not good in general. You know, Jhin can't use Infinity Edge anymore, has to kind of go back to his kind of collector build, or you can just go Bloodthirster, to be honest. I mean, or even Stormrazor. Yeah, the Stormrazor build, as I have here, is probably going to be the build, kind of similar to the Caitlyn build, which makes him a bit weaker in my opinion. And Samira, just in general, not a great champion to play, just because of there's so many tanks and there's so many bruises in the meta that it struggles for Samira to get the reset on her ultimate. Nilah AD carry, same with Twitch as well, really weak during the early game. If you can scale, if you have some supports by your side, like enchanter supports, that could be, you know, really good to keep you alive, you can kind of keep that going, you can do that. If you don't, then they're going to struggle a lot during the laning phase. So you need to make sure that you be careful with that one, because it's going to be pretty difficult to do. So you have to be careful when playing these two champions. But in general, they can be pretty strong if they scale to mid and late game. Corki, just not really a carry in a bot lane, and Misfortune I've just never liked since the rework, in my opinion. Onto the supports, the final tier list for supports. As I mentioned, like with this, I kind of like to go through every single champion because new patches, especially big patches like this, are so important just to talk about every champion and give my opinion across. Supports, again, I haven't really changed too much. There are a few champions going up, a few champions going down, but no real big changes. Pyke, in my opinion, is still one of the best carry supports. You can roam, you can make such a big impact as a support, and also really, really good during the laning phase. Lux, again, as more of a carry support, is also very, very strong. Maokai support, still really good as a tank. The same with Nautilus. Both these two tanks at the moment are the best tanks to play in the support role. Maokai is just super annoying. Nautilus, just with his crowd control, is so unbelievably broken. That's actually absolutely crazy to deal with. More tank supports in the S tier: Thresh, Leona, and Ornn, and also Braum as well. These champions are okay. You know, Leona has really good lockdown. I think Leona and Ornn are probably the best out of the two S tier supports. Ornn is pretty underrated in my opinion as a support. He's so good. He's so tanky. He has so much crowd control. And if anyone stands near a wall, you can just knock them up super easily with Glacial Augment. Same with Leona. From range, you can just use your ultimate, catch out any enemy champion. It's just really good for lockdown. Thresh and Braum, I feel like are just a little bit more difficult. I mean, Braum's playstyle in general is a bit different, where you're more of a defensive support rather than an aggressive, proactive support. Whereas Thresh is just a lot more difficult to play, a lot more difficult to master, and just not that great. Karma, pretty decent support in terms of her poke damage and how strong she can be there. Lulu and Yuumi are okay. I don't think they're like instant win conditions, which is why they're not in the S+ tier. I don't think either of these two champions are instant win conditions. To be fair, saying that, I don't think Lux is also in instant win condition in S+ tier, so I should probably move her down. But in general, Lulu and Yuumi are decent, but they are beatable. They're not like completely broken support picks that are just going to win you the game. You know, both these champions can still do that same thing. If you have a fed champion on your team, then you can just play around them. But in general, they're just not as strong as what they were before, but they still offer a lot for the team. Janna with her peeling is really, really good, and also Soraka with her healing. A tier, I moved Seraphine up. There's kind of a new build going around with Seraphine at the moment, with like shielding and how strong she can be with her shielding at the moment. So she can also be really, really good. I've moved her up from B tier up to A tier. I definitely need to give that build a try. Senna has so many different build paths that she's in a bit of a weird spot at the moment, but I feel like in general, Senna as a support is pretty decent. Gragas as a tank support, also pretty decent. The same with Swain and Alistar. In my opinion, the tank supports above are better, but these tanks can still perform pretty well. Swain, as I mentioned, with the new build, with the new AP item, and Alistar since he has an easy lockdown with his Headbutt Pulverize. Enchanter supports Nami and Sona, again not as strong as the ones above in my opinion, but can still perform pretty well. And Rakan, since he has so much playmaking potential with his ultimate, with his knockup, again can be really, really good. And B tier, more unique champions, you know, the likes of Brand, Morgana, Set, Zyra, Galio, even Blitzcrank, to be fair. I mean, Blitzcrank, if you don't land your hook, you're the most useless support in the entire game, and I've already seen plenty of Blitzcranks in this new season miss every single hook, so that's why he's in B tier. Again, just in general, these supports in B tier just don't really offer too much. You know, Morgana and Zyra are just more annoying than anything else with their poke, but they don't really offer anything outside of that. Galio could be pretty good if he gets a lot of magic damage, but in general, his lockdown is just a lot more harder to hit than the other champions above. Again, Brand kind of falls in the same tree as Morgana and Zyra, where you could do poke damage, but that's about it. No one really walks into range with Brand to use his combos, especially in the dual lane, and even if you do, you can get caught out really easily by other supports. And then Set, just not the same playmaking champion as what he was before, but still can perform pretty decent in support, but again, more of a unique champion. That is it. That is every single champion for the new tier list. As I mentioned, a lot of new items, a lot of changes in the game. The tier list might change, might go up and down as well. I've still got the rune tier list and the item tier list to do, which I'll do probably over the next few days. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed the tier list breakdown for patch 5.2. Let me know your thoughts in the comments as always. And until next time, stay safe and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.